Depending on how old you are and where you live in the world, you may or may not remember the MG brand. It was once a British sports car company, but these days it's Chinese owned and it's producing some rather interesting electric vehicles. It's just making its return to Ireland, and one of the models it's going to have is this. It's the MG ZS. Now this is a fully electric mid-size SUV, so it's coming in around about the size of a Nissan Qashqai, a Hyundai Tucson, Kia Sportage, that kind of segment. It's quite a busy segment. It has a 44.5 kilowatt hour battery, has 143 horsepower, and has a driving range of up to 263 kilometers. So let's take a closer look at what makes this so interesting. Now, before we go any further, we'd love to know what you think, so please do get involved in comments below. And as ever, we'd ask you to please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's start with the front, because it does have, well, if I'm honest, a kind of familiar face. It is, if you look at the headlights and the shape and design of the grille, quite reminiscent of the previous generation Mazda CX-5. Now, that's not a bad thing, it's just an observation. But you have these quite distinctive daytime running lights, you have this large grille and quite a bold MG logo. Now, part of the reason for that is when you press this in, this slides up quite neatly, and inside you have your charging ports. So it's your usual charging port, but also has a CCS for fast charging at up to 50 kilowatts. It's quite nice, it's quite neat how it integrates this. The only thing I would say is that because of how this comes out and pops up, it is a little bit awkward to get in and get into where the charge ports are to plug them in, especially with a bulkier, heavier cable on a DC charger. It just means you got to kind of look in, and there isn't actually any light underneath here. So if you're filling up at night, for example, you do have to maybe get your iPhone out and shine a little bit of a light on that. But that said, it's quite neat in how it integrates it. Most people will just get used to it, just get the hang of it, but it's just one of those things. And when you're done, pop it in and just press it in. It's very, very simple. As for the rest of it, well, it's quite a usual sort of familiar shape. You've got, you know, a little bit of vents here. This is the highest spec model, so it's got quite nice paint on it. It's got these kind of contrasting silver panels here. It looks pretty good. I think most people will appreciate how it looks. It's not certainly an offensive looking car by any means. Then as we move along the side, you've got 17-inch alloy wheels, electrically folding door mirrors, so when you lock the car, these will automatically fold in. You've got contrasting silver roof rails, and then around the back you've got quite a decent boot. To open that boot, you just pop in this MG logo and it just lifts up like so. You've got 448 litres of boot space in the back here, which is pretty good actually for the segment. It's on par with what most of its rivals will offer you, and it's actually quite a wide aperture. It's not very high, so lifting heavier items in isn't that tricky. And also you can fold the rear seats. They have a 60-40 split, and when those are down, that increases the overall cargo volume to 1100 litres. So it's not too bad in that respect. Underneath that boot floor, although you don't have a spare wheel, it does come with a tyre inflation kit, a warning triangle, and space to put in your charging cables if you don't want to have them rattling around in the boot. You can also take out the boot floor and slide it down into a lower setting, and that's what you'll need to do if you want to get the maximum storage space out of it. And with the boot drop down lower, these storage nets are quite handy for keeping whatever you have in the side cubbies. Now, when it comes to rear space, the MG's not that bad actually. This driver's seat is set up for my driving position. I am 5'9". As you can see, I'm sitting right in the back of the seat, but I've got quite a good amount of knee room. I've got pretty good headroom. It is a little bit lower because you have this large panoramic glass sunroof, but that really adds a sense of space inside here. You've got large windows. They're not all that high, so even kids sitting in the back here will have a decent enough view. The armrest on the rear door is at a pretty nice and comfortable height. You've got a good amount of storage here. You've got electric rear windows. There's an adequate amount of space in the seat pockets for putting in something like a tablet or a small book or something like that. You've got one USB port in the back here, a small little storage area, so you could plug in a phone and leave it sitting in there. The only thing I would say is that it is quite a small middle seat. So really 2 adults will sit back here in comfort. 3 is going to be a real squeeze. 3 kids will probably do okay, although again, it's going to be very, very tight. You're not going to be able to put a third child seat or booster in the middle here if you have them other child seats in the 2 isofix points on the 2 outer seats. So that's just something to consider. I would say it's really best suited for if you're going to have 2 people in the back. 3 people, yes, it's possible, but only at a squeeze. Now, I wouldn't quite call it a no-frills approach inside the MG ZS either. It is largely a straightforward design. Everything is quite easy to find and easy to see. You've got a multifunction steering wheel here. It's not too chunky, it's a good size. It's quite easy to grip. There's a slightly flat bottom on it. And the multifunction controls here they're quite large. They're easy to use just by your thumbs. You then have all the columns here for your usual lights, wipers, all that. Very straightforward, very simple. You do have a lane keep assist button here, which you can activate or deactivate by using that. By default, it's on. And then you have a slightly lower down, you have a cruise control function. Now, the only thing I would say is there is adjustment for the steering wheel up or down, but it doesn't go in or out. Now, that's not the end of the world. This car does have electrically adjustable driver's seat, so that does make it a little bit handier, and it's quite easy to find your driving position that suits you. And actually, once you do that, the visibility you have is quite good. The instrument display is a part digital system, so you have a color display at the center, and that will give you all the necessary things you might want to use, like the onboard trip computer. It will show you, for example, when you're on a dual carriageway and you have the lane keep assist working, that will display there as well. And then on the left you have your speedometer, and on the right you have a display showing how much power you're using, and also then when it goes into rates of recharge. Obviously, being electric, it's a single speed gearbox. It's controllable here by a rotary controller, which you push down to engage park, and then either side you can twist it to the left to reverse, to the right to drive. You have an electronic parking brake and automatic hold as well. And then you have these 3 toggle switches further ahead. This on the left is your drive modes. So there are 3. You have Eco, Normal and Sport, and they obviously have the sort of effects that you would expect, and we'll talk about those in the drive. You then have the curves, which again I'll talk a little bit more when we get going, but that's how much energy regeneration happens, and then a battery button here which will show you basically the state of charge with the battery, what's going on there. A very simple air conditioning system here. It doesn't actually have any readout displays here, but when you do adjust it, it will come up on the infotainment system. Very simple, very easy to use. You've also got heated seats functions here. The touchscreen itself is one of the more basic ones out there, if I'm honest. It's not great to use. It's quite simple. Some people will like that. Not everyone wants to have effectively an Apple iPad sat on their dashboard. So you're probably going to use this quite minimally, although the good thing is it does come with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. And most people, if they like to have their connected services, are probably going to use that more so than anything else on the infotainment system. Really, you just got controls for your audio, for your radio. It has built-in navigation. That's pretty much it. That's all you're going to use. So reverting to using the CarPlay functions, or be it Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, much more useful there. You've got USB-A ports further down here in this storage area, so you can plug in your phone. That's how it connects to the system, and you can just leave your phone down there out of the way. So it's quite handy. There is a reasonable amount of stowage throughout the cabin, because you've got a small area on top here. You've also got 2 cup holders in here, again decent size, and then you've got another storage bin in here. So there is actually quite a good bit of room if you do need to put stuff in, and that's obviously discounting the fact that you can put quite a large bottle in the door cards as well. To keep things simple, there's only one type of MG ZS, although that is available in 2 specification grades and then 3 different types of paint grade. So you can have a solid, a metallic, and then a tri-coat paint, depending on how much money you want to spend. But effectively you've got 2 versions and only one powertrain, which is this. It is a 44.5 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery, and that powers a 143 horsepower electric motor, which has 363 newton meters of torque. Now, they're actually pretty decent figures for what is effectively a mid-size crossover or SUV. It actually feels quite nippy on the move, and for the most part it handles everything quite well. The suspension is a little bit on the firm side. It has a little bit of patter on really uneven surfaces, and for example on the motorway, going over cat's eyes and things like that, it does kind of tend to pound a little bit. But for the most part, it's actually quite a pleasant car to drive. Bear in mind, not everyone is obsessed with handling and sharpness and all this kind of stuff. For most people, they're going to get in and they're going to find this is a really nice car to drive. Totally acceptable for what it is. It's got 17-inch alloy wheels. There are 3 driving modes to choose from. Obviously you have a normal default setting when you get in, but you can adjust this toggle button down here to an efficiency mode or an eco mode, and that will obviously slightly dull down the responsiveness of the accelerator pedal. It will add a little bit more driving range to it. Or alternatively, you can go the other way and select the sport mode. That will increase the responsiveness of the electric motor, but it does also add a little bit more weight to the steering. Now, some people will like that. I think it adds a little bit too much heft to it, and it just feels a little bit artificial when it is set up that way. So for the most part, I think driving just in the normal default mode is the way to go with this car. Interestingly as well, as you go through the different drive modes, that will actually affect the range that's displayed, and there's around about 20 kilometers across the board, so between sport mode and going to the eco mode. You can also choose between one of 3 different energy recovery levels through this KERS button, which stands for Kinetic Energy Recovery System. That effectively changes how quickly it decelerates and how much energy it draws back into the battery. Now, in the first setting, which is 1, it's actually not bad. It coasts along quite well and only uses a minimal amount. The mid-level 2 does add a little bit more, but going up to 3, particularly in urban settings, you are quite close to having a 1-pedal driving system. It really does add quite a lot of regen, slows the car down very, very quickly. We'll even deploy the brake lights in the rear for those behind you, so to mitigate any instance of somebody not seeing how quickly you're decelerating. It's quite good. I think it's the one to use if you're going to be sticking to urban driving. Otherwise, leaving it in 1 or 2 on longer runs is absolutely fine, but it does work quite well. And a lot of people will like that ability to have that kind of 1-pedal driving system. Now, range is the big thing that everyone's going to want to know about, and I think the 263 kilometer range is perhaps a little bit on the optimistic side. I know it's a WLTP figure, and I know at the moment as this is being filmed, it is late in December, the weather is cold. That will obviously have an impact on the battery. I think realistically, across the year, you can probably expect to get between 200 and 220 as a fairly safe bet. I think it's a realistic figure for most people. MG claims that it will do just over 18 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. I think that's a more accurate figure. I think realistically I've seen it hovering around about 19.5 to 20. Again, that's pretty decent actually for a car this size, for an SUV. It's not bad in terms of how much energy it uses. And also the charging rates are pretty good. I plugged this in with around about 20 kilometers left according to the computer, plugged it into a rapid DC charger at 50 kilowatts, and it pulled that power down very, very quickly. So I think if you are going to be doing longer journeys, even if you do need to stop in midway and use a DC quick charger, it's actually going to be quite good. Half an hour was all I plugged it in for, and it got it up to just over 80%, and that gave me the guts of another 160, 180 kilometers to keep going on my journey. So that's pretty good, I have to say. I think that's the one aspect where this car has really impressed me the most was just how efficient it seems to be. Granted, it doesn't have a huge battery, granted it doesn't have huge range, but it does actually work quite well, make the most out of that. And I think, as I've mentioned, if you're going to be an urban driver, you're not going to be doing huge distances, that's where this kind of car makes a lot of sense, and that's really where it starts to show up. And you know, it's a little under 30 grand. It's around about the price of a Renault Zoe. Yes, a Renault Zoe, a ZE50 will do a much longer range, but that's a much smaller car too. So for a lot of people, SUVs, crossovers, that's what a lot of people want. And for the most part until now, if you wanted an electric SUV, you were up, you know, paying big premium money. Whereas now, this is a much more affordable proposition. And you know, it's not a premium product at all, but it is not bad. You know, it has all the right sort of features you want. You've got heated seats, you've got decent air conditioning, you've got you know, all your connectivity systems. I can plug my, you know, Apple CarPlay. It's kind of got everything you'd want: cruise control, lane keep assist, as I said, all the sort of safety features that are there. It has, and it just comes in at a good price point. I think as an electric SUV, if you're not hung up on the badge or anything like that, this is actually quite a good car. So there you go, that's our review of the MG ZS. A really interesting and very well priced electric car. If you're considering that you want to make the switch to electric, you want an SUV, you're not all that worried about the overall range because you don't maybe do vast distances every day, this is a car that honestly you just cannot ignore. Go and check it out. Anyway, if you want to know more about this, head over to our website, which is CompleteCar.ie. We have really detailed reviews of this and all of its rivals, not to mention some really useful EV buying guides there too. So head over to the website and take a look around. In the meantime, we'd love to know what you think, so get involved in the comments below. Do hit the like button if you've enjoyed the video, and as ever we remind you, please do subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.